الجلسة الثانية لهذا اليوم. قبل أن نبدأ الجلسة الثانية طبعا نستضيف الدكتور يوسف محمد، رئيس برلمان إقليم كردستان المستقيل. دكتور يوسف وإن كان قد قدم استقالته لكن لم تقبل بعد. الدكتور يوسف خريج جامعة بغداد، ماجستير في العلوم السياسية، وكذلك حاصل على شهادة دكتوراه من جامعة السليمانية، وهو عضو مؤسس في حركة التغيير. فليتفضل مشكورا.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السيدات والسادة، أيها الحضور الكرام، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. يسعدني أن أكون معكم اليوم في هذا المؤتمر القيم. حقيقة يتميز العراق بتاريخ زاخر وعريق بالأحداث والتغيرات، ومنها تلك المتعلقة بالمجال النفطي. بالرغم أن الجهد الأكاديمي المبذول بهذا الشأن ما يزال ضئيلاً، وطالما كان التعامل مع النفط يتم عن طريق مجموعة من الشعارات والديماغوجية السياسية. وحان الوقت كي تفكر النخبة العراقية أكثر فأكثر بجدية بهذا المصدر الطبيعي بصورة علمية وموضوعية لأهميته القصوى في حياة العراقيين ومستقبلهم وبيئتهم. ويمكن أن يؤثر النفط إيجابياً على مختلف قطاعات الحياة إن تم التعامل معه بطريقة معرفية ووعي علمي. من هنا تنبع أهمية انعقاد مثل هذا المؤتمر كحاجة ملحة يستحق القائمون عليها الشكر والتقدير. الحضور الكريم، إن النفط مادة معقدة في حياتنا ووعينا الجمعي، وبرغم أن البعض يعتبره مصدر كل البلاء والشرور، في حين يراه غيرهم مصدراً للمعيشة والرفاهية وبناء اقتصاد قوي وسليم. ولا يخفى عليكم أن هنالك أدبيات واسعة الانتشار تدعي بوجود شيء يسمى لعنة النفط، وأن النفط عاملاً مضاداً للديمقراطية. ولكن إمعان النظر في هذه الأدبيات يثبت أنها تتحدث عن الإيرادات وكيفية التعامل مع النفط، وليس النفط بحد ذاته. إن النفط والغاز ثروتين طبيعيتين وهبهما الله لنا بوفرة، وهو حاشاه جل جلاله لم يعطينا لعنة، بل إن تعاملنا وسلوكنا مع هذه الثروات الطبيعية المهمة هو مصدر الألم والمآسي. ولعل من واجب الحكومة أن تقوم بدور إيجابي لتنظيم علاقة الطبيعة بالمجتمع، لما لذلك من دور هام ومؤثر على الأصعدة الاقتصادية والسياسية والبيئية، بل وحتى الاجتماعية. إن العراق يعتبر من الدول العشر الأولى في احتياطاته النفطية والغازية، ومن أقدم الدول التي كشفت فيها هذه الثروة الطبيعية، لكن بالرغم من وفرتها وقدم استكشافها واستثمارها لم نتوصل بعد إلى مرحلة نتمكن فيها من استخدامها خدمة للصالح العام والتنمية طويلة المدى. لقد استخدمت إيرادات النفط خلال مراحل عديدة من تاريخ العراق، إما لإشباع متع وأهواء النخبة المتسلطة، أو لشراء الأسلحة وإثارة الصراعات والحروب الداخلية والخارجية. ونتيجة لذلك يعاني أغلبية المواطنين في دولة غنية مثل العراق من حرمان من الحاجات الضرورية والخدمات الأساسية. وكنا نأمل أن تستخلص السلطة في إقليم كردستان الدرس والعبرة من تلك التجربة وتقدم نموذجاً مغايراً، لكن مع الأسف الشديد تجربة الإقليم مع النفط لم تكن أحسن حالاً إن لم تكن أسوأ. إن إحدى المدخلات الرئيسة لتقدم المجتمعات والدول تكمن في استخلاص العبر من الماضي والتعامل مع الأزمات والأخطاء والمشاكل بروح علمية وموضوعية، ومن خلال الانفتاح على المراجعة والتغيير بعيداً عن التعصب والتزمت. من هنا فقد حان الوقت لتصحيح الأخطاء الماضية والكف عن التفكير في النفط كسلاح أو مصدر وحيد أو رئيس للاقتصاد أو أنه صانع المستقبل. إن الاستمرار باستخدام النفط كمصدر وحيد للاقتصاد سيؤدي إلى إضعافنا داخلياً وخارجياً، لا سيما إن أي تغيير في أسعاره العالمية أو في حالات الحصار أو الحرب أو تطوير طاقة بديلة نتيجة التقدم العلمي والتقني المطرد يؤدي إلى تعريض اقتصاد العراق بعامة واقتصاد الإقليم بخاصة إلى خطر وجودي كما نراه الآن بصورة جلية في الإقليم. لذلك إن لم نتعامل مع النفط بطريقة مغايرة فإنه وبدلاً من أن يكون أداة للبناء والاستقلال يمكن أن يتحول إلى أداة للضغط الخارجي، بل بالأحرى التحكم بنا من الخارج. لقد حان الوقت لتغيير علاقتنا مع النفط والتفكير في كيفية استخدامه في زيادة فرص العمل وتحسين معيشة المواطن في مناطق العراق كلها، وأن يكون أداة للتلاحم والتعاضد الوطني بدلاً من عامل خلاف وفرقة ومصدر تهديد خطير للسلم الاجتماعي والديمقراطية والاقتصاد أيضاً. من هنا فإن التحدي الأول أمام العراقيين كدولة الآن هو في كيفية استخدام النفط كأداة لترسيخ الاتحاد في ظل اقتصاد لا يعتمد عليه كلياً، بل يستخدمه كمصدر لرأس المال. ومن المؤسف كما قلنا أنه على مستوى الإقليم فإن النخبة المتسلطة لم تستطع تقديم نموذج جيد في إدارة النفط يجبر الآخرين على تقليده، بل بالعكس تماماً، لأن الخصائص الأساس لنموذج إدارة حكومة الإقليم للملف النفطي تتمثل في عدم وجود الشفافية ووضع إيرادات النفط كلها بيد أقلية قليلة جداً. وهكذا بدلاً من أن تتحول هذه الثروة الطبيعية إلى أداة للرفاهية أضحت خطراً على حياة الناس ونظام الحكم وعلى كل العملية الديمقراطية في كردستان. إن القضية العادلة للشعب الكردي تستغل اليوم كأداة لتراكم المال عن طريق نهب ثروات الشعب وعن طريق الفساد، ونتيجة لذلك بات الفارق كبيراً بل وشاسعاً في السلم الاجتماعي الاقتصادي في الإقليم، إذ توجد هنالك أقلية قليلة جداً تتمتع بثراء فاحش مقابل أكثرية فقيرة، ما يشكل خطراً على مستقبل الإقليم. في الوقت نفسه أدت الإدارة الخاطئة للنفط في الإقليم إلى ظهور اقتصاد سياسي سمته الرئيسة هي اعتماد الناس في معيشتهم على الحكومة، وبرغم أن الحكومة هي بحد ذاتها ملك لنخبة سياسية متسلطة، ونتيجة لذلك تقلصت الطبقة الوسطى وضعفت استقلالية الفرد معيشياً واقتصادياً، ليتحول المجتمع إلى مجتمع ريعي يفقد فيها المواطن استقلاله السياسي. وقد أدى ذلك إلى إضعاف الديمقراطية وتفشي الفقر في آن معا. وكما هو معروف في أدبيات التنمية، فإن ازدياد الفقر لا يحدث أبداً في مجتمع فيه ديمقراطية فعالة. إذن ففي حين أن الحكومات العراقية المتعاقبة حرصت على إبقاء الإقليم في الهامش تنموياً، فإن السلطة السياسية الكردية لم تستطع أن تستفيد من الثروات لتنفيذ برامج تنموية حقيقية. ولعل من نافلة القول إن النفط يمثل اليوم مشكلة كبيرة في العلاقة بين الإقليم والحكومة الاتحادية. ففي هذا المجال نرى بأنه بداية يجب على سلطات الإقليم ونظيرتها الاتحادية حل خلافاتها السياسية بصورة جذرية من أجل الاستخدام الأمثل للثروات الطبيعية الهائلة الموجودة في الدولة، لأن استمرارية هذه الخلافات تؤدي إلى استمرار استخدام الثروات في الحروب والصراعات، إضافة إلى تعريض حياة الشباب للخطر وتحويلها إلى وقود لهذه الصراعات التاريخية العقيمة، بدلاً من استخدام الثروات والطاقات الطبيعية والبشرية لتنمية البلد وازدهاره. وحين التفكير بالنفط يجب التفكير في المجتمع وليس النخبة والسلطة السياسية، ونعني بذلك كيفية الاستفادة من هذه الثروة الجماعية لخير الجميع أو الصالح العام. وعلى هذا المستوى نحتاج إلى اللامركزية الإدارية والمالية، وعدم تقليل الصلاحيات الدستورية المخولة للأقاليم والمحافظات، مع ضرورة وجود مستويات متعددة وصارمة من الرقابة الاتحادية منها والمحلية. لقد رسم الدستور الاتحادي خارطة الطريق لكيفية التعامل مع الثروات الطبيعية ووضع مبادئ العلاقة بين الحكومة الاتحادية والإقليم والمحافظات، وهي كالآتي: أولاً، إدارة مشتركة للحقول المستكشفة قبل نفاذ الدستور، وإدارة محلية ذاتية للإقليم والمحافظات المنتجة للحقول المستكشفة بعد نفاذ الدستور حسب المادة 112 أولاً من الدستور. ثانياً، رسم السياسات الاستخراجية لتطوير النفط بصورة مشتركة بشرط تحقيق أعلى منفعة للشعب ومراعاة تقنيات مبادئ السوق وتشجيع الاستثمار حسب المادة 112 ثانياً. ثالثاً، جني الإيرادات اتحادياً حسب المادة 111، ويمكن الاتفاق على ضوء ذلك أيضاً على التسويق اتحادياً بآليات معينة تضمن الشفافية. رابعاً، التوزيع العادل والمنصف للإيرادات اتحادياً مع مراعاة ألف النسبة السكانية، باء تعويض الإقليم المتضرر من جراء سياسات النظام العراقي السابق، جيم تحقيق التنمية المتوازنة للمناطق المختلفة من البلاد حسب المادة 112 أولاً من الدستور، دال تخصيص حصة للمحافظات المنتجة للنفط والغاز حسب قانون مجالس المحافظات وقوانين الموازنة الاتحادية السنوية، هاء تخصيص حصة مناسبة وعادلة من الإيرادات المستحصلة اتحادياً تكفي لقيام مؤسسات المنتخبة في الإقليم والمحافظات بأعبائها ومسؤولياتها دستورياً حسب المادة 121 ثالثاً من الدستور. من هنا فإن توزيع إيرادات النفط والغاز والإيرادات الاتحادية كلها دستورياً لا يستند فقط على النسبة السكانية كما هو معمول به الآن في قوانين الموازنة الاتحادية وخاصة قانون الموازنة لهذا العام الاتحادي. إضافة إلى ذلك فإن الثروات الطبيعية ليست ملكاً لجيل محدد، بل هي ملك الأجيال المقبلة أيضاً. لذلك حين نفكر في الثروات الطبيعية يجب أن نبحث ونحرص على ما نورثه للأجيال الجديدة. وقد قمنا بجهود كبيرة بهذا الصدد عام 2015 حين مناقشة وإقرار قانون صندوق النفط والغاز في الإقليم في مدة رئاستنا لبرلمان كردستان، وسعداء بتشريع قانون اتحادي أيضاً بهذا الشأن. من خلال كل ذلك وفي الختام يمكننا القول إن جدوى وأهمية هكذا مؤتمرات يتجلى في البحث عن سبل الاستفادة والاستخدام الأمثل للثروات الطبيعية، بما يؤدي إلى الرفاهية وتعزيز اللحمة الوطنية ومحاربة الفقر مجتمعياً، وعدم تعطيل القطاعات الأخرى الصناعية والزراعية والسياحية والمعرفية، بل تنميتها وتطويرها أكثر فأكثر، مع عدم عرقلة العملية الديمقراطية أو المساس بالحريات الأساس التي ضمنها الدستور، وبما يؤمن حل جذري للخلافات التاريخية المزمنة بين الإقليم والحكومة الاتحادية في مجال النفط والغاز والمجالات الأخرى. ولعل من المهم القول إن مواد الدستور تمثل المبادئ الأساس للوصول إلى الحلول الناجعة في هذه الخلافات كلها. أتمنى لكم التوفيق في ذلك، وشكرا.
شكرا جزيلا للدكتور يوسف محمد على الخطاب المميز. Our next panel is about the Kurdistan region in Iraq and the way forward. The panel will be in English, and if you could please switch to your channels for interpreters. As we all know, the Kurdistan region in Iraq has been known as a beacon of hope and an area of security, safety. Business was booming in Kurdistan region. There was a lot of acceptance for religious minorities. Many people fled to the region following the Iraq war in 2004. Until recently, this was the story, although the region always had issues of weak institutions, corruption, lack of transparency, budget laws were very weak, if ever passed, and so on. The political situation with Baghdad was always escalating, and this continued until the rise of ISIS, the fall of Mosul, and the fall of Sinjar. Meanwhile, the region also continued in exporting their oil, despite objections from Baghdad. However, now the situation changed after the destruction of ISIS, and the oil prices in oil went down, and the Iraqi forces, as well as the Peshmerga forces, luckily restored order in many of the occupied areas. So our next panelists will be covering different areas, angles of the Kurdish situation, particularly post-referendum in Iraq. So the first panelist will be Professor Istrabadi. Yes. So and followed by Mr. Shwan Zulal and Dr. Bilal. Please, Doctor. Professor Feisal Istrabadi is a fellow on constitutional law at Iraq Energy Institute. He's also the founding director of the Study of Middle East and National Resource Center at Indiana University. He was also ambassador and permanent representative of Iraq to the United Nations. Dr. Bilal Wahab is the Nathan and Esther Wagner Fellow at the Washington Institute. He was also founder of the Center for Development at the EUCERS, and he was teacher at the American University of Iraq in Sulaimania. He's written extensively about the economy and policy of Kurdistan as well as the rest of Iraq, and his expertise are areas of policy and good governance. And Kak Shwan Zulal is the managing director of Carduchi Consulting, which is for energy and political risk. He's also fellow for the European Center for Energy and Resource Security at King's College in London. Welcome our panelists. Perhaps we can start with Shwan, as he has a presentation to make, and then we will continue with Professor Istrabadi and Dr. Bilal with the Q&A, and towards the end of the session, we'll be happy to take some Q&A from the audience. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. At Carduchi, we've been working in Kurdistan region since 2007 for almost 11 years. We cover the energy sector, and I don't want to waste too much time on talking about that. But what I'm going to do today, I'm just going to give you an overview about the what's happening in Kurdistan oil sector at the moment. And I think one of the biggest questions many is asking about the Kurdish debt and the financial situation in relation to budget and so on. As you can see from here, the current production after what happened in October when Kirkuk was lost, and the production of Kirkuk was quite significant to contribute to KRG budget. So what we can see here, for example, if we look at the largest producers, Tawki and Formala, and the other fields, for example, you can see Atrush and Sheikhan were quite significant. I think one of the biggest drops we can see in the last 2 years is Taktak. It's been quite a disappointment for Kurdistan region, which was producing over 100,000 barrels 2 years ago, but as we can see, is significantly reduced. The export, again, just sort of show you the tail off after October. Loss of Kirkuk was running around 500,000 barrels a day, and it sort of slowly declined to its lowest to around 230,000 barrels. And then, as we can see, it's sort of starting to increase, and this increase has been due to KRG moving most of its production into the pipeline to try to boost exports. In the last few weeks, as we know, that some of the Kirkuk crude has been making its way to the refineries and the topping plants within the Kurdistan region. In February figure, it's a bit distorted. I think is much, if we sort of take over 6 months period, we're probably looking around 320,000 barrels of exports over the period of a year, maybe, because of logistic issues and various in the way the tankers works. Sometimes some crude is left in the storage and so on. These charts actually shows the Kurdistan region oil assets, or the assets that still got significant value, and all the Kurdish oil companies who primarily focus on Kurdistan. There is significant value and significant interest, and I think one of the things take away from the second chart is you can see there's only about around 10 companies left operating in Kurdistan. I think at the height of Kurdish oil industry, we had something around 30 oil companies, but a lot of them had relinquished their interest, have left Kurdistan, or some of them with disappointing results, some of them due to various politics, risks, and so on. Within the second chart, if you look at the NPV, which is after the settlement, I think Dana Gas has been one of the most significant breakthrough last year. I think what KRG or the Ministry of Natural Resources in Kurdistan is trying to do is trying to reset the industry and bring, trying to remarket the energy sector and try to bring new, maybe M&A, bring new interest from investors. We can see also Ganel and DNO, they had various settlements trying to realign their debt, and because KRG used to owe these companies quite a lot of debt, and obviously with Dana Gas they had the arbitration and so on. The plan didn't actually go very well. I think what this was the KRG's plan. They put up 20 blocks for marketing, and they're looking into a new round, bidding round, which KRD never had before. So it's similar to the Iraqi sort of style, trying to generate interest and bring new companies into Kurdistan. And as you can see from the block, most of those blocks either been relinquished or the operators just left, or the board has been realigned with new borders. But given what happened, this was happening around, I think it was July, and the plan was by this spring, the Kurdistan regional government will try to do a sort of marketing drive and try to bring new interest into the market. However, the referendum has completely sort of dislodged the plan, and the plan it hasn't really gone forward, and we don't really know when this gonna sort of take off again. So at the moment, the plans on ice. Just to briefly touch on the issues of debt, I think one of the most talked about issues about KRG salaries and so on, but the accumulated debt over the last few years. But I think one of the things, if you look at from this chart, this is actually from the M&R and from the KRG itself, you can see the KRG was running a deficit since 2010 and probably earlier, and you can see at the height in 2014, just before the oil crash and before the federal government stopped sending the KRG budget, the deficit was running at 2.7 billion a year. Where was that money spent? I think the earlier panel about the economics, and we saw the presentation about the electricity issues in Iraq. These issues apply exactly the same into Kurdistan region. We can see the electricity cost, and these are mostly subsidies and buying diesel for power generation. You can see from 2010, we haven't got the new figures. I think those figures are significantly reduced now because the KRG's electricity generation is at lowest. It's almost half capacity at the moment. So you can see they're spending at its height about $3.5 billion a year on buying diesel mostly. The second biggest item is fuel subsidies, and I think Iraq, the rest of Iraq has the same issue with fuel subsidies, again from 2010 all the way to 2015. I think what necessity sort of forced KRG to actually, well, there's two factors. If you look, it peaked at about 1.6 billion in 2014. In 2015, actually KRG liberalized the fuel market, and but that coincided with the crash of oil prices. So what you can see, the figures drastically went down. However, we don't know. I mean, obviously KRG can't afford to subsidize the fuel market at the moment. But I don't know if things come back. Maybe with oil prices going up, maybe that will go again. One of the things many clients and many people sort of wondering about the KRG prepayment, the debt which has been accumulated over the last 2 years by getting advance payment from the traders and then doing various structures of how to finance this debt. I think this is one example from one trader, which is well publicized. As you can see, the interest. I think one of the two things I would like to highlight here is the 12% interest, and this 12% interest is almost like a quasi-bond, and the interest is actually the trader pays the investors who actually bought the bonds. So the trader again takes this cut from the discounts on oil, so it could be anything between another 5 to 6 to 7%. It is very hard to know. The other interesting thing, if you look at the second notes, is the offtake agreement. For example, this particular trader, and there's quite a few other traders, there's all the main, Trafigura, Vitol, and obviously Rosneft and so on, they have a different agreement. This agreement, you can see they have a £3.5 million offtake agreement from the KRG, from Jehan. And that's almost a third of what KRG is exporting now. And that's for 5 years. So no wonder KRG doesn't have any cash flowing at the moment. And this is one agreement for one particular trader. But if we sort of multiply that by at least about 5 other traders, yes, the levels are different, but you can see how precarious KRG's finances are. I think it's gone back. And this is sort of a chart, it's sort of in details. I don't want to go into it in very much details. That's how the flow of the money and the oil goes. In the middle, you have the intermediary, which is pretty much the oil trader, which enters a contract with KRG, pays the KRG the advance money, and then the money has been structured into various finance vehicles. From this side, you can see the oil trader, and then you have the another sort of SPV, which is special vehicle. It's been created, usually in this case, actually in this instance, the special vehicle is registered in Ireland. Then you have the execution is in Cayman Island. So this is a complex issue. I think there's been a lot of talk about how to reconcile, how to deal with from the Iraqi government perspective, especially when Parliament and the Iraqi government was dealing with the budget. How you try to resolve this issue, because KRG is in a bind at the moment. They have anything between $1.5 to $5 billion in this type of, not in this particular type, but in the pre-financing and debt. How is that going to be repaid? I think if I maybe go back, I think if you look at the bottom line, I think one of the things the traders were trying to sell and they're telling the investors are these prepayments is very, because this is the offtake agreement rather than obligation, and it's very difficult to challenge in court. So the offtake agreement is from Jehan, and I think that's what the selling point. So it's very difficult to challenge in any court or trying to neutralize it. From other debts, these are the, in terms of comparison, in terms of interest rates and so on, you can see this is the company's debt. And if you look at the maturity date, the repayments is pretty much this year, next year, and by 2021, most of them are due. I think one of the biggest issues the companies in Kurdistan are facing is new refinancing, because these debts, some of them is 5 years, it's been taken out 5 years ago, so the interest rate is still fairly low. Some of them has been subtle, but most of them haven't. I think the companies will be struggling to try to get new financing, and it will be interesting to see in the next few months and next year how this goes. And this is just a quick chart to is just an estimate how the KRG's PSCs work. And given our estimate is in the next 6 months, KRG will probably be exporting around 350 to 360,000 barrels a day. I don't want to go into too much detail, but if you look at the bottom line figures, the KRG will probably be making roughly around 4.5 billion, 4.8 billion a year, which translates to about 400 million. This 400 million at the moment, we don't know, because obviously these figures are not being published. The KRG is very coy about publishing those figures. It's roughly around $400 million a month. Given that the KRG has been saying that to pay salaries and to balance his book, it needs about 900 trillion dinars. Given you have 370 billion dinars going in March from the federal government, local income is around 200 to 180 billion dinars. That will roughly leave you around 500 billion dinars to fill the gap. With that sort of figures, I think KRG and with the Iraqi government, if it keeps payments of that 320 billion dinars, they can balance the book. But I think the big question is whether Baghdad is willing to keep sending that money without receiving any oil. The numbers we talked about is 250,000 barrels to be handed to Soma, Jehan, and so on. We don't know. I think one of the things to watch out for in the next few, I don't think we'll find any clear answer to that probably after the election. I think this figure of 370 billion coming from Iraq, we assume that's based on this sort of projections. Once KRG managed to pay back all the debts it has from the prepayment, which is probably going to be around next year about this time, if they keep pumping oil and not sign any new prepayment agreements. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Shwan, for this comprehensive review of the revenues and figures about KRG. Thank you. Perhaps before moving into the constitutional aspect and angle, I could ask Dr. Bilal Wahab just to pick up on the geopolitical, geoeconomic issues and oil policy now, in Kurdistan region, particularly post-referendum. What's the way forward with Baghdad?
Sure. Again, thank you very much. I'd like to join my colleagues and friends in saying thanks to the Iraq Energy Institute and Dr. Loy in particular. I'm definitely happy and pleased to be here. The KRG is going through some tough times right now. As you can see in the news, there are protesters on the streets and public strikes at many of the public offices, in particular the health and the education sectors. And the debt that the KRG economy has accumulated it has become the talk of the town and one of the reasons for the anger of the public. In a way, the economy has sort of been shrunk into the question of paying salaries, public salaries. So what is the way forward? I think we heard a good analysis before from Dr. Yousif, from the sort of historical, legal, and political background, and also how that translates into figures and debts by Shwan. But the way forward that I see is the KRG had an experiment with oil nationalism from day one. The ultimate goal of energy policy was designed, the laws, the industry, the contracts, was designed in a way that would ultimately serve the Kurdish endgame, the political goal of independence. Without judging the rights and the performance, the referendum put a major roadblock, if not an end, to that aspiration, to that project. So, in my opinion, the way forward is to use, for Kurdish energy policy, to adopt a new goal. Instead of that goal being a political goal, that is independence or secession, the KRG should focus on economic goals, where the focus of its energy policy is the prosperity of the Kurdish citizens, the KRG citizens, and the prosperity of the region. How do we do that? How is that possible? Obviously, the KRG is only one agent, one character, one major actor here, but it takes two to tango. It needs cooperation from Baghdad, and for that, the KRG itself needs to reinvest in Iraqi politics. That has been, definitely since 2014, a continuous divestment from Iraqi politics, disengagement from Baghdad. So the way forward is actually to reverse that, and for Iraq, for Kurdish politicians and political parties to send their best and brightest to defend KRG rights from Baghdad. Let me go maybe very briefly on some of the points on how such a vision could be achieved. I think number one is to depoliticize oil. Oil has been, I think the Speaker of Parliament said that it's been a weapon. And yes, it's still being used as a weapon. I think we should start looking at oil maybe more positively as a revenue, as a source of income, that we use the income for economic development and not just to channel it toward salaries and public expenditure. The charts that we saw earlier about how oil is the economy and economy is the oil, and that relationship has really undermined Iraqi economy, and of course the KRG did not adopt any different vision and fell into that trap from day one. So depoliticizing oil by decoupling oil and the economy, breaking that linkage where oil is a source of revenue and then we look at that revenue and then we budget it, rather than looking at how much money we have depending on the price of oil that these governments do not control, and then budgeting becomes a process of, okay, how do we spend this much money that we have, and then basically budgeting becomes not a question of economic development and achieving a certain goal, but basically this is how much money we have and therefore how are we going to spend this, which has been the practice since 2003, unfortunately. The other point of depoliticizing oil is to inject more rule of law into the hydrocarbon sector. The oil sector in Iraq and the KRG operates in major legal and institutional vacuums. Yes, the KRG has a Kurdish oil and gas law, but the Iraqi government still doesn't have one. The draft law of 2007 did not pass, and the efforts to pass that have not been successful. So in my opinion, one of the number one priorities for the next parliament would be to address that major legal gap. In Kurdistan, there are also requirements in KRG's oil law for some national oil companies, such as the Kurdish Oil Marketing Organization, that have not yet been passed. Institutionally, the Kurdish parliament passed legislation for building an oil and gas fund that would increase the level of transparency and auditing from the legislature over the flow of oil revenues. That institution, despite the law, is yet to be built. So building these institutions would be very necessary in the KRG in particular to depoliticize and depersonalize, I would say, policy making in the KRG. The circle where energy policy is made in the KRG is rather small. It's almost a clique. I would also add to this that there are technical solutions to some of the problems that exist between KRG and Baghdad. Look at Khurmala, for example. Politically, it would be very difficult to address how KRG and Baghdad should cooperate over Khurmala, but if we leave it to the technicians, the technical people, to look at maximizing revenue and maximizing oil output, and leave the politics out of it, then the solutions are maybe easier to come by. This trouble between KRG and Baghdad has seriously cost both sides quite significantly. On the Iraqi side, the Iraqi government blacklisted almost all of the companies that operate in the KRG, reducing the pool of companies that would be interested in working with the Iraqi government, with the Iraqi oil ministry. It has resulted in the bifurcation and the fracture of Iraqi energy policy, that unity that Iraq would need in order to be in a better, stronger position in negotiating with international oil companies at OPEC, for example. And it has also resulted in economic loss, definitely for the KRGs. The figures that Shwan showed earlier showed the risk surcharge that companies who buy Kurdish oil charge the KRG for that political risk, the litigations that Baghdad has over the KRG. So that zero-sum dynamic between both sides has definitely hurt the KRG economy. And then finally, some of the strategic relationships that could have existed between the north and the south, connecting the northern fields and the southern fields, rebuilding that strategic pipeline that would allow the Iraqi energy industry to transfer, depending on whatever environmental or political crises that existed once upon a time, which is very necessary for the health of the energy sector. That conversation cannot be had, again, because of those conflicts between KRG and Baghdad.
Thank you.
So finally, just to maybe one more minute, I would say that looking forward, the question of governance is very important. Having that relationship between KRG and Baghdad, oil federalism, rule-based oil federalism to be reinstated is also healthy for addressing one other factor, one other trouble that KRG has, which is lack of transparency and accountability, because in the KRG, the institutions are too weak to hold the energy sector and policy to account. But if oil federalism were to work, then that dynamic, that horizontal balance of power would allow the KRG energy sector to be more transparent and therefore more accountable. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We'll come back to a lot of interesting points you raised there. But let's speak with Professor Istrabadi about the constitution in Iraq. It was voted for by all Iraqis, high percentage, but it's always caused a lot of issues between Baghdad and Erbil. particularly it's been highlighted recently if we refer to Article 140 and other constitutional rights of the Kurdistan region within the Iraqi government. Dr.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here in Baghdad again. Yes, I think there are a lot of problems in the Iraqi constitution that are built in the manner that it was negotiated, in the manner that it was written, in the manner that it was put forward. But it's the constitution we have. I don't think there is a political will anywhere for reforming the Constitution. I don't think that even though there are a lot of technical flaws in the Constitution, even before we get to the political issues and the legal issues, fundamentally a Constitution, of course, is a political document. It has legal ramifications, but it is not basically a legal document. It's a political document, and there simply is not the political will. At least I don't perceive a political will in the country to reform the Constitution or to amend it. So for the foreseeable future, it's the document we have. I think one of the issues, and I think some of my colleagues have particularly I think Dr. Bilal, I think, said something that I want to jump off from, and that is that the Constitution from a Kurdish perspective, I think, was designed as a way station for maintaining the option open for independence. And that's true not only in the manner in which it was drafted, and of course it was not only drafted by the Kurdish parties, the Shia religious parties in 2005, for reasons of their own, went along with the agenda. But it's not only in the manner in which the Constitution was drafted that it sort of kept the state of ambiguity or the state of imbalance, but it's also been in the manner in which it has been implemented and interpreted by the two sides, each one for its own benefit. That, of course, is predictable, and that happens. But I think the question going forward now is to what extent is the leadership of the Iraqi Kurdistan region invested in Iraq? Not as a default, not as an unfortunate outcome, but rather as being actively engaged as Iraqis in Baghdad. I still don't see, this is now, allow me one sort of footnote that's political rather than legal. I don't see an Iraqi agenda of the Kurdistani political class. And this makes it very difficult to see a way forward. I have my critique of the Baghdad political class too, which has to understand, I think, more clearly that the Constitution itself is designed to ensure that Baghdad cannot deal either with the Kurdistan region of Iraq, nor indeed with any other part of Iraq in the same old tried methods which have failed. So we are in a sort of a precarious situation where we have both sides that need to, I think, revise the manner in which they approach the Constitution. It isn't a sword to do battle with one another. If we've talked about oil being a weapon, we've also weaponized the Constitution, I think. And we need to find something which, in my opinion, and I was the principal legal drafter of the Transitional Administrative Law. I should correct one thing, by the way, you said in the introduction I was the Deputy Permanent Representative, not the Permanent Representative at the United Nations. But from the time that we have been engaged in sort of the effort to restore constitutional governance in Iraq after 2003 till now, I don't think the political class has come to a modus vivendi a way of living together, a way of using the Constitution to resolve the problems. Rather, they have used the Constitution, I think, as, again, as weapons against one side or the other.
Yes, thank you. You hadn't arrived yesterday. We had Dr. Barham Saleh,
yes,
former Prime Minister of Kurdistan, speaking, and I quote, he said, "There is a Kurdish reality in Iraq that needs to be dealt with according to Kurdistan's constitutional rights within Iraq."
Yeah.
Again, most politicians revert back to the constitution when they want to get closer, but yet it feels like it's always been a burden between the two sides, although it's supposed to be a unifying document.
In fact, it was anything but a unifying document. It was a document that in many ways tore the political class apart. And I understand, and Dr. Barham has, and unfortunately I couldn't be here yesterday, but Dr. Barham has written a number of articles in which he said the same thing. And I understand that. Of course, the Constitution recognizes the rights of Kurds and indeed the rights of all Iraqis. Understood, and that's a legitimate point and a legitimate issue to be discussed. But the question I would say, if Dr. Barham were here, and I know he's not, and so this is unfair, but I would ask him is, okay, but what is your agenda for Iraq? What is the agenda? I mean, we had an event which has traumatized the country, I think, which was the referendum. So what is now the agenda? What is the way forward? The Constitution seems to me, if it has one theme that emerges from it, it is this, I think. Strategic issues and strategic problems are supposed to be resolved sort of collegially between Baghdad and, I mean, the one phrase that recurs multiple times in the Constitution is the federal government with the regional governments and the governorates that are not formed as regions. In other words, the drafters of the Constitution repeatedly attempt to force policymakers at all levels to work collaboratively and cooperatively to solve the issues. Instead, rather than doing so, and maybe it takes getting the politicians out of it and putting technicians in or technical people, I don't know. But rather than doing this, instead we have had both Baghdad and Erbil insisting on what their prerogatives are and interpreting the Constitution accordingly. So we have 112 first, which says that existing fields are supposed to be managed by Baghdad. Yes, but 112 second says that it's supposed to be, the long-term strategy is supposed to be collaboratively arrived at between all levels of government. So this, I think, is the basic problem, is that the political class has focused too strongly on its prerogatives and not enough on sort of problem solving and collaboration, which I think the Constitution actually pushes them towards.
Thank you so much. I'll pick on the referendum point and move on to Dr. Bilal Wahab, who recently wrote, as well as the referendum issue, those two key points, you recently wrote, "Kurdish nationalism needs a new start." And if you could elaborate a little bit and perhaps respond to Professor Istrabadi about the agenda of the Kurdish politicians who are preparing for an election with just over a month's time. They're planning to come back to Baghdad and rule the country with their fellow Iraqi Arabs. What's your view on that?
Thank you. I think, there's the expression that it takes two to tango, or in Kurdish we say you need two hands to make a sound. We can't blame one side and not the other for the conflict. And yes, for example, if you look at the KRG energy sector, from the get-go, every step that the KRG took, Baghdad opposed it. Baghdad opposed the KRG oil and gas law. Baghdad opposed the contracts that KRG signed. Baghdad opposed the pipeline that the KRG built. And so that resulted in a negative reaction, you know, in the opposite direction from the KRG by basically saying or realizing that the language that Baghdad understands is to shoot and ask questions later, to let's, you know, get the oil out and then get Baghdad to, you know, deal with the reality, build the status quo and have Baghdad, you know, deal with the pipeline that we now have. And it actually has worked. I mean, with time, every time that the KRG achieved a milestone in the energy sector, for example, the oil law was the problem, but when oil production started, Baghdad stopped talking about the legality of the oil contracts and started to focus on revenue sharing from the exports, from the production and the export that the KRG was making. So that is what I meant by, you know, that conflict has been rooted in political balance of power of both sides and lack of trust, rather than rule of law, rather than legality. And then, for example, yes, there is a constitution, but neither side have been willing to take their legal disagreements to the constitutional court, because at the end of the day, I agree, it's a political document and every side reads the constitution according to how they interpret it or how facts on the ground fits the narrative that they have. So that model has failed. It failed for, it hurt Iraq by bifurcating and fracturing the overall Iraqi energy policy and you know, inability to pass the hydrocarbons law. And the KRG also lost a lot of revenue on one hand, and also put the KRG energy policy, in order for Baghdad not to know, on a trajectory that has been full of opaqueness, lack of transparency, very secretive energy policy that has become a problem not only for relations with Baghdad, but within the KRG itself. The main grievance of the opposition outside of the ruling coalition is that they have no visibility into the KRG energy sector. So this has been a mess, so to speak, that has hurt everyone. And so what I'm suggesting is that the way forward would be, that's what I mean by the new Kurdish vision, is you know, let's use oil for the Kurdish citizen and not for a Kurdish aspiration as right and as you know, God-given that right is, for a variety of reasons that the referendum and the aftermath proved or showed at least that the international community, the regional geopolitics, and Iraqi politics is not yet ready for Kurdish independence, and is willing to punish the Kurds for that move, even if it's a peaceful process, through a peaceful process like referendum. That is not fair for the Kurds. That's not necessarily just, but this is geopolitics, and politics is usually not fair. So the question, the options would be, do we cry over spilled milk, or do we find a way forward? And the way forward would be, we tried this, it's not working, it resulted in $26 billion of debt, in people on the street demonstrating against the government, in the government not being able to pay salaries. Okay, so business as usual isn't working, what else can we do?
Thank you so much. Shwan, if we come back to the figures, numbers, and the economy post-referendum, a referendum whereby many neighboring countries, if not most, advised against it. The United States said it was ill-timed, ill-advised. So did the United Kingdom and many other members of the Security Council. Perhaps it was even ill-planned from an economic point of view. The figures you showed us show that the KRG is in a lot of debt. How do you see that being reconciled? Do you think Baghdad will step in to help its Iraqi citizens in the Kurdish provinces to pick up again? Because the situation isn't good there. We're not saying Baghdad is doing great, Basra is doing great. It is throughout Iraq, but let us focus your answer about Kurdistan.
Thank you. I think I just want to address a couple of points Bilal and Dr. Istrabadi sort of raised about the you know, the oil industry in Kurdistan and how sort of came. I think one of the things I've always said, the Kurdish region and Baghdad, they were out of sync after 2003, because you know, if we look at the timeline, when Kurdistan region introduced oil and gas laws around 2006, I think, or 7. Kurdistan region had about 10 years head start getting rid of Saddam. So in terms of development, they were out of sync. I mean, Kurdish region had their own civil war in about 1904. they went over that period. And if you remember, in 2006 and 7, Iraq was on the verge of its own civil and sectarian war. So the Kurdish region felt always being pulled back by the central government. And at the time, I think one of the things the Kurdish politician decided, or the oil policymakers decided, is probably this is a lost cause. Let's just do our own thing and then see how it goes. And then, as Bilal discussed, the Iraqi governments keep pulling the KRG, trying to sort of hold it back from trying to go forward. I think one thing I don't think anyone can deny, the oil policy in KRG, if you look at it from a sort of political point of view, is a failure. It hasn't really worked. And the referendum results and what happened after loss of Kirkuk fields, it shows that economically KRG is not viable. Even when Kirkuk field was being sold by the Kurdish government, one thing a lot of people forget, Kirkuk's employees and the government there, the salaries were actually paid by the central government. So the KRG, if we would have even managed to annex Kirkuk back and make it part of the Kurdish region, the economics just didn't work. So the referendum itself, it was just a political posturing rather than any reality checks. And on the issue of, just going back to the issue of the oil sector, I think from an investor point of view, if you look at the oil sector in KRG, I think one thing, maybe Ashti Harami is not very popular here in Baghdad, but I think one thing he did, he actually managed to bring a lot of investors in Kurdistan, a lot of capital to be investors. Maybe there's a lot of issues, I don't want to go into that, but if, for example, KRG hasn't pursued his own energy policy, passing his own energy laws, I'm almost sure that probably KRG wouldn't be producing more than 10, 15,000 barrels now, because as we can see from the rest of Iraq, yes, the producing fields are doing okay, but there has been almost no new development. There's been very, very few and far between, especially in Kurdistan. I think historically there was no development. So what now? What sort of politician needs to realize? It's not a zero-sum game. KRG is producing over 350,000 barrels. If there's no restraints, the Baghdad is trying to hold it back at every sort of hurdle. First of all, you'll have the development going to be accelerated. So that means more cash for Iraqi to be invested in schools, hospitals, salaries, whatever it is. Secondly, what do you have? You have sort of a model of how to attract investors. We heard from the last 2 days in the panels, I think most people sort of emphasizing on the need to actually, be a welcoming environment for foreign investors. Companies are businesses. They just don't do it out of the goodness of their heart. If the economics doesn't work, they're not going to come in. And I think that's one of the lessons maybe it can be learned by the Iraqi government. Try to sort of capitalize on that. And the production is there. The money is being invested, and the money is actually is all being coming out from the outside. So it's a win-win situation if the politician can manage to get the act together.
Thank you so much. Perhaps we have time for a couple of questions from the audience. I'm sure we're all getting hungry for lunch, so start.
Thank you for this opportunity. First of all, I would like to thank you for Iraqi Energy Institute to hold this occasion. My question is to Dr. Bilal about the future of the conflict between the KRG and the central government, especially nowadays told about the coming back the Peshmerga forces for the British area. The new phenomenon is the exporting the oil from the Kirkuk to Iran, and some other pipelines from Kirkuk to the Ceyhan. I wanted to ask it about the British area and the KRG and the central government among the international or energy basin, from Caspian basin, Mediterranean basin, Arab Gulf basin, Iranian, Turkish conflict from in the KRG and the central government. Thank you so much.
Sure, very briefly. Oil is an easily tradable commodity. If you find a legal, efficient, revenue maximizing way of exporting it, then that's the best practice. If not, that oil will definitely find its way to the markets through informal channels. That's a code word for smuggling. So, again, it's in the interest of both the Iraqi and the Kurdish government to find, find a way of maximizing revenue by injecting more rule of law into the energy sector. I asked the question about, so what is the way forward? So let me maybe address very briefly some answers. A, Baghdad and KRG have really hurt each other. The referendum resulted in a lot of bad feelings about Kurds in the rest of the country. That needs reconciliation. The Iraqi reaction to the referendum has really hurt the Kurds and the Kurdish economy. So we need a period of trust building between both sides. I'd add to that the US policy for Iraq, let me address that for a second since I live in Washington, is a strong KRG inside a strong Iraq. One of the problems of the relationship between these two parts, the federal government and the regional government, is each side has seen this as mutually exclusive. The Kurds have always looked at a strong Baghdad as a threat. And Baghdad has seen a strong oil-rich KRG as a step toward independence. The way forward is to make sure that these two can both be strong together, and that by going back to the constitution, going back to rule of law, and finding win-win situations. Finally, KRG has things to offer. It has leverage. If in 2007, where KRG industry was very, very nascent and basically had just prospects, today it has a pipeline, production capacity, export capacity. So it has leverage. So if in 2007 the draft hydrocarbons law gave tremendous rise to the Kurdistan region, then today the KRG can probably get into a better deal with the federal government, and then vice versa. The Iraqi government can tap into those resources. Kirkuk is the easiest and most efficient way for Kirkuk's oil to the international markets is through the pipeline that the KRG controls, rather than building another one, just as an example. So these are ways in which both sides have leverage and they need each other. Instead of adopting a zero-sum game in which each one tries to hurt the other one, we should be looking into avoiding this prisoner's dilemma, finding friends that can be arbiters, that can be enforcers, and chart the way forward. And I think the elections give us that opportunity. Maybe before the elections we'll be probably witnessing more of the blame game, but definitely after the elections.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments, gentlemen?
Okay.
Brief question, please, and then Mr. Hassan.
Okay. I want to thank Iraq Oil Institute for holding this forum. I have a question for Professor Feisal and Dr. Bilal. Why Iraq do not have a hydrocarbon law, and how the US-Iran conflict affected that Iraq did not have a hydrocarbon law? May I repeat my question? If you got my question.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Why Iraq do not have a hydrocarbon law until now, and how the US-Iranian conflict in Iraq affected that?
Why do we conflict affect Iraq? Yes.
Well, I mean, I think you have had representatives of the Iraqi government sitting around to answer the question of why there is or isn't legislation about any number of issues. So, I can't address that necessarily. I think that I can say that there is very quickly a saying in Africa that when the elephants fight, it is the grass that is destroyed. We have to make sure whatever is going to happen between whatever is happening between the United States and other regional powers and Iran, that the fight doesn't occur on Iraq, because it will destroy Iraq if it does. So I think that when I was in the foreign ministry, and since as a commentator on Iraq's foreign policy, I have advocated, and I continue to advocate, good relations with all, by Iraq, good relations with Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Iran, the Gulf states. If we tilt in whatever is likely to happen, and the new National Security Advisor, John Bolton, is someone I knew well and served with at the United Nations, and when he was a US ambassador to the United Nations. If Iraq chooses sides, it will be, I think, catastrophic for Iraq. We have to maintain a strict neutrality.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Hussein Karagolli. The question is to Dr. Yousif, as well as to Bilal and Shwan, please. One thing that was not addressed is the transparency on the oil sales, and especially the revenues from those oil sales as well, the terms of the oil sales. And the reason I ask is, if we're looking forward for a solution for the Kurdistan region's economy, it seems that there will need to be some kind of support from the international community through development financial institutions to restructure and refinance the debt. And that would need to have Baghdad's input, if not actual explicit or implicit support. And in order to do that, they have to have clarity on the revenue stream from the KRG. So could you please address سؤال على الشفافية مع إصدار النفط and the revenue stream with regards to that? Thank you.
شكرا جزيلا. حقيقة هنالك مشكلة كبيرة في مجال الشفافية كما قلت في كلمتي في إقليم كردستان. عندما كنا في برلمان الإقليم كنا نريد أن نتعاقد حتى مع شركات أجنبية مختصة في هذا المجال للقيام بعملية الرقابة على كل العمليات النفطية الموجودة في إقليم كردستان، من العقود إلى الاستكشاف وإلى استخراج النفط وبيع النفط. ولكن مع الأسف الشديد الحكومة في إقليم كردستان رفضت ذلك. وكذلك هنالك مؤسسات رقابية مختصة في إقليم كردستان أيضا لا يمكنها أن تقوم بالرقابة على مجال النفط والغاز. نحن كما قلنا في الكلمة مع أن يكون هنالك رقابة صارمة وأن يكون هنالك شفافية في مجال النفط ورقابة حتى اتحادية، ليس فقط محلية، حتى يجب أن يكون رقابة اتحادية. وكذلك يمكن الاستعانة بالشركات المختصة في هذا المجال. تم التعاقد في الإقليم مع شركة في هذا المجال، ولكن لحد الآن ليس هنالك مخرجات معينة من عمل هذه الشركة في عملية المحاسبة في مجال النفط والغاز. وهذه مشكلة كبيرة حقيقة في إقليم كردستان، ليس فقط مشكلة اقتصادية بل تحولت إلى مشكلة سياسية أيضا، لأنه إحدى الخلافات الموجودة الآن في إقليم كردستان بين القوى السياسية هو عدم وجود الشفافية في هذا المجال. نحن في برلمان الإقليم أيضا شرعنا قانون صندوق النفط والغاز لكي يكون هنالك جمع لكافة إيرادات النفط والغاز في الإقليم في هذا الصندوق، ولكن مع الأسف الشديد تم تعطيل عمل البرلمان آنذاك ولم يتم تشكيل الصندوق. إذن هنالك محاولات جدية في هذا المجال في الإقليم سياسيا وعلى مستوى البرلمان وعلى مستوى الهيئات الرقابية، ولكن هنالك عوائق أيضا. ويجب أن يكون إحدى المسائل اللي يمكن أن تتفق الحكومة الاتحادية مع السلطة في إقليم كردستان أن يكون في هذا المجال، أن يكون هنالك رقابة على كافة فعاليات النفط والغاز في الإقليم.
شكرا جزيلا دكتور. Any final comments from our panelists? Thank you.
Just may answer Hussein. I think one of the issues, KRG is well known to be not one of the most transparent entities out there. And transparency has been an issue not only in oil, in pretty much all sectors of the KRG. But I think one of the things people need to realize, KRG has always used this excuse that if they publish everything, if they give the figures out, Baghdad is chasing them. We know the legal threats, blacklisting, and the budget, and so on. So KRG has been, for the last probably 5-6 years, been hiding behind this excuse, trying to sell it to the public. Look, we can't really, we are transparent. We really want to publish it, but we can't, because if we do, then Baghdad will chase us for the money. And as we can see from in 2013 and 14, the budget's starting to be reduced and then cut. It gave the KRG the perfect excuse to hide behind this sort of pretense that it's not really them that they don't want to be transparent, but because of legal issues, because of the way Baghdad is dealing with them and trying to chase them for the money that they want. So Baghdad, I think the federal government needs to be a bit more smarter about it and try to sort of, because if we look at it for the last 5, well, even probably 10 years, Baghdad hasn't really managed to do, apart from threats and issuing sort of legal things, it hasn't been successful in trying to recover any money from Kurdistan region. So maybe a new approach is needed. So the KRG as an entity, whether the politician, individual politician or individual ministries, don't have that excuse to hide behind this idea that if they do, then the public generally, or the KRG as an entity, will be the net loser.
I agree with everything Shwan said, and I made the point that one of the negative side effects of this conflict between KRG and Baghdad has been secrecy. Ironically, it's like a catch-22. That relationship is a source of secrecy, and that relationship is actually the key to the solution. Because inside the KRG, as the speaker mentioned, there are no powers, no forces, institutionally and politically, that have the leverage over the energy policymakers to make them transparent. If there's a pronouncement from the parliament, if there's a law from the parliament, that doesn't mean that it will be implemented. No one has power to force, let's say, the Ministry of Natural Resources to issue a report. When they wanted to issue reports, they did. When they didn't want to, they didn't. And there was no element inside KRG politics to shift it either way. Baghdad has that power. If there were revenue sharing, for example, between KRG and Baghdad, and both sides agreed to, then yes, Baghdad has the power, the budgetary power, to force transparency into the KRG. And that's why I go back to my earlier point about the only way forward is making oil federalism, as stipulated in the Constitution, work. But I would add to that, and there have been efforts as well, KRG unilaterally issuing reports, production and export reports. Now they're delaying, they have a contract with Deloitte, which I understand is not an audit, it's a review, but nonetheless a step in the right direction. The oil law that KRG has is committed to the EITI principles. Maybe the action doesn't really match those principles. But I would add that sometimes the KRG itself is afraid of transparency, part of it of repercussions from Baghdad, but sometimes from its own domestic politics. Because transparency, in the absence of accountability, results in populism and resentment. So if there is no accountability mechanisms, when someone is known to be corrupt and he is free at large, that results in impunity, and that results in resentment, and that's one of the reasons why you have people on the street in Erbil, Duhok, and Sulaymaniyah.
Thank you so much. Final remarks from Professor?
Yes, I don't disagree with the notion that, I'm not interested in the chicken and the egg argument, which came first. Whose fault is it? We have, I think we can agree, a political class that on the whole has failed the country at certain levels at least. And that's been unfortunate. We have a way forward in the Constitution to work on these issues collaboratively. I think the question from Baghdad's perspective, since it may be I'm the only one on this panel who has some sympathy with Baghdad's perspective on some of the issues that we've been talking about, I think the issue from Baghdad's perspective is that it has never been convinced, and for good reason, that the Kurdish leadership has made a strategic decision to work in the foreseeable future within Iraq. it has always seemed, I think, to many in the Baghdad political class, that it has always been with one eye towards the exit. If we're able to get past that, I think that that may lead to some of the salutary effects you've both advocated for. It comes down to what the United Nations calls in its jargon confidence-building measures. And I think asking both capitals to be more transparent perhaps can begin to, and to work cooperatively together as the Constitution mandates, hopefully gets us to the point of that kind of confidence eventually.
Thank you so much, Professor. We are all Iraqis, Iraqi Arabs, Iraqi Kurds. So we will continue our discussion over lunch. We're not here to defend any side. We're presenting views. A warm thank you to our panelists. Thank you so much for your time, for coming to Baghdad. And a very warm thanks to the audience for your participation, for Iraq Energy Institute for hosting us, and specifically Dr. Luay Al-Khatib, who's just left the room, I think. Thank you so much, and please, I was told to ask the audience to come back here after lunch at 2:30 for the next session on renewables. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.